Genesis stood proudly in front of the mirror and admired her thick curves. She just knew she was going to turn heads at Sunday morning service today. She knew that she was giving that red dress suit and hat a new purpose. She reached down on the dresser and pulled out her red lipstick and began to carefully apply it to her full lips. She puckered her lips a few times, sprayed on her favorite perfume, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. She and Malcolm rarely rode together to church anymore. Ezra, her driver, sat out front in the black Cadillac Escalade and climbed out as she approached the vehicle. Ezra quickly opened the back passenger door for her to climb into the seat before closing it. "How are you, First Lady?" He greeted her with a smile through his salt and pepper-colored beard. He put on his sunglasses and looked back at her in the rearview mirror. Genesis did not like too many people, but Ezra held a special place in her heart. He was like the father figure that she had never had. "Just fine, Mr. Ezra," she replied, smiling sweetly in return. They continued their conversation on the 30-minute drive to the church that she shared with her husband, Pastor Malcolm Gordon. They pulled up to the parking space that was designated for her vehicle. Ezra climbed out of the driver's seat and came around and opened Genesis's door. He took her hand and helped her step down and then rushed to open the door to the church that was only for the pastor and his wife. "Thank you, Mr. Ezra," Genesis said. "I will see you after service, ma'am," he replied in his gentle southern accent. Genesis strolled toward her office and passed by her secretary, Vivian, on her way to her office door. "Good morning, First Lady Gordon," Vivian said happily, obviously from drinking her usual morning coffee. Genesis could smell the fresh brew as its powerful, inviting fragrance permeated the office, and it smelled amazing. Vivian made the best coffee that Genesis had ever had, and she wanted some. "I brewed a fresh pot," Vivian said, as if reading Genesis's mind. Genesis loved Vivian's attention to detail, but she kept her out of her private life as much as she could because Vivian had a tendency to talk too much, but she kept her close enough to keep her informed about what was going on around the church. "Here you go," Vivian said while carefully placing a piping hot mug of French roast coffee on Genesis's desk. Genesis did not say thank you, but just nodded her head silently to Vivian. She then began to shuffle through some papers laying on the top of her desk. Vivian paused a brief moment and then abruptly pivoted and briskly walked out of Genesis's office door. Many people thought that Genesis's personality could be a bit abrasive and rude, but she looked at it as a way to not let others walk all over her. However, it was just really a way for her to get her way. She felt that she was very skilled in doing that. Her cell phone began to vibrate on top of her desk. She glanced at the name on the screen, which read Harmony. She was annoyed that her big sister would call her right before church service. Genesis did not have the time or the patience to deal with her sister's latest troubles. Against her better judgment, she answered the phone. "Yes," she answered. Her tone was not too thrilled. "Well, good morning to you too, baby sister," Harmony replied. Genesis' impatience began to become more obvious. "I don't have a lot of time this morning," Genesis said dryly with a sigh. Harmony got straight to the point. "They lowered my food stamps this month," she explained. There was a long silence. "I was wondering if you guys could help me out," Harmony continued. Genesis' impatience increased even more, and this time it was unmistakable in her voice. "Didn't I just give you $100 last week?" she asked Harmony, though it was more of a demand than a question. "Yes, you did," Harmony began to answer, but was abruptly interrupted. "And I gave you another $75 to get the kids some back-to-school clothes," Genesis continued complaining, her voice rising a few decibels. Harmony hated to ask her sister for help because she always made her feel small when she did. Her sister made her feel like she was a nuisance and an inconvenience. Harmony was a kind and strong woman, but she had fallen on hard times within the last year. She did not understand why Genesis gave her such a hard time when she asked her for help because she knew the situation that Harmony was in. Harmony felt that Genesis somehow got enjoyment out of having the upper hand financially. Genesis lived a very lavish and stylish lifestyle. She was very self-centered and greedy for material things. Even though she was the first lady of a large mega-church, she had one of the nastiest attitudes. Their grandmother had raised them when their mother had gone to prison, and after she passed away, the girls only had one another. Yet Genesis acted as if she did not even have a sister. She acted like she was embarrassed by Harmony. "Fine," Genesis said in frustration. "I'm not giving you any more money after today," she continued. These words hurt Harmony, but she swallowed her pride because her two children, Carissa and Dylan, needed to eat. "How much do you want?" Genesis asked. Harmony gave it some thought and knew that the number needed to be good and needed to stretch her a while since her sister told her this will be the last time that she would give her money. She knew that whatever she asked for would be like pennies to Genesis. $500, Harmony replied, somewhat nervously. She had never asked her for that much money at one time, but she felt like she needed to make a go of it. The little money that she had asked for in the past was never enough for what she fully needed, but she figured that some help was better than no help at all. She was hurt that her sister had the snooty attitude that she had about money, considering their past, and how she herself had helped Genesis through some hard times over the years. Their grandmother would always tell them about how funny people acted when you needed help. She would say that if you asked someone to help you with your bills, they didn't want to help with that. But if it was for something other than bills, they seemed more willing to help. "I will send it," Genesis replied. "But after this, no more." Then Genesis promptly hung up the phone without saying goodbye. Moments later, a tall and handsome gentleman stood in the doorway of her office. As if on instinct, Genesis raised her eyes up from her phone and looked at him. "First Lady, service is about to start," Deacon Hank Goins said as he gazed deeply into her eyes. Genesis's heart began to flutter as she gazed back at him silently. Their eyes locked into a stare that seemed to silence everything else around them. No one knew about their relationship, and Genesis wanted to keep it that way. They were both married, but had found the passion they were both lacking in their marriages with each other. She delicately touched the top of her cleavage and held her hand there. She did not know why she did that, but it helped calm and cool her down a bit. She swallowed, cleared her throat, and gave Deacon Goins a girlish grin. She stood up from her chair and walked around her desk toward him. She deliberately sashayed her voluptuous hips. She knew what doing that meant to him. He balled up the fist of his right hand and put it between his teeth as he was always taken aback by her breathless beauty. He gently took her hand and walked with her to the entrance of the sanctuary on the side of the pulpit. Deacon Travis was waiting at the entrance for the both of them to arrive. Both deacons were to walk Genesis to her seat at the pulpit, where she sat and cheered on her husband and senior pastor, Malcolm Gordon. While they waited for the ushers to signal that they were ready for the First Lady, Deacon Goins took his hand and placed it onto the small of her back. This sent electricity throughout Genesis's body. She briefly lost focus of the current task. She came back to the present as Deacon Travis gently nudged her forward by her elbow. She held her head high and allowed both deacons to lead her to her seat. She caught a few glares from some of the women sitting in the pews. This did not faze her, as she was used to this type of attention from other women who she just saw as jealous and envious of her and her lifestyle. Moments later, Pastor Gordon entered the pulpit and gave a brief message before the choir did their Sunday morning selection. After the church announcements were completed, Pastor Gordon returned to the pulpit and delivered his message. Even though he and Genesis were having problems in their marriage, she always admired how he metamorphosized into a different person once he was behind the pulpit. She loved the electrifying way his voice ebbed and flowed, rose and lowered at the right points when he delivered his sermons. He was so convincing, he could convince anyone to do just about anything. And he was also a very handsome man. He was tall, with smooth caramel skin, and a lean, muscular, toned build. He was attractive to many women. Genesis knew this all too well. Her husband was very charismatic and charming, which added to his strong, handsome features. He always dressed immaculately for church service, and their parishioners loved him. She knew that all of their parishioners did not feel the same way about her. She didn't care because she was the one who had the huge rock on her finger. She knew that being Mrs. Malcolm Gordon gave her prestigious status that she literally could not afford to dismantle. She felt a hand on her left shoulder, and without turning around, she knew who had placed it there. "Hey, Mom," Gene, her eldest son, whispered into her ear as he sat down behind her. She turned around and blew him a kiss. She may have been many things, but she loved her children. Her youngest son, Grant, came and sat down next to his brother. He waved at his mother and she blew him a kiss as well. At the end of the service, Malcolm turned and beckoned for Genesis to join him behind the pulpit to pray over the congregation before dismissing them. Deacon Goins and Travis both rushed to her side and walked her to her husband. She did her best not to look into Deacon Goins' eyes, and she felt that if she did, the whole church would know their little secret. After service, she joined Malcolm in the vestibule to greet and speak to their church members. She always hated this part of her role as her heart simply was not into it. Malcolm seemed to enjoy it fully, and one could tell so because his face would light up as he laughed with the elder members and kissed babies. Gene and Grant were also there and greeted churchgoers. Genesis plastered a fake smile on her face and did her best to be cordial and friendly, but she did not fool her husband. He gently grabbed her elbow and whispered into her ear. "Can you be more obvious about not wanting to do this?" he whispered while smiling. Genesis hated when he pretended to talk sweetly in her ear as a performance for others. Her smiling back was to also cover up the fact that she was annoyed with him. "I am doing the best that I can, dear," she replied through clenched teeth while still smiling. She gently snatched her elbow out of his grasp. She saw a flash of anger across his light brown eyes, and she turned away pretending not to notice. She began talking to Evangeline Dawson, one of the churchgoers. Evangeline gave Genesis a brief greeting and immediately went to Malcolm and struck up a friendly conversation with him instead. This was a little too friendly. Genesis watched as Evangeline laughed a little too hard at some of the things that Malcolm was saying. It was so obvious that she was flirting with her husband right in her face, and it made her disgusted just watching it. Genesis knew that Evangeline had been after her husband for years. She must have thought that Genesis was not aware, but Genesis always noticed things. After the meet and greet in the vestibule, Malcolm told Genesis to go ahead and go home, as he had some additional meetings with the church board that he had to attend. But Genesis knew better. She knew that he often used business meetings as a cover for his other romantic encounters. She smiled sweetly and gave him a light kiss on the cheek. "I will see you at home then," she replied. She and the boys left together. She told the boy to go home in Jean's convertible and that she would see them a little later. Ezra met her at her office, and they walked to the SUV that was waiting and running. He helped her into the back seat. He climbed into the driver's seat and looked at her in the rearview mirror. "Where to, First Lady?" he asked her as he put on his sunglasses. She looked down at her cell phone and read a text message. "I am not going home just yet," she replied as the corner of her mouth rose. He nodded silently once she told him where they were headed. Off they went to their destination as she put on her shades. Thanks so much for watching Purple Rose Studio. If you enjoyed this video, check out part 2 in this series. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Also drop a comment below about your thoughts on the video. See you in the next one.